Unfortunately, Mr. Rakesh Raghunathan could not join in, so we have Sonal Ved and Nandita Agarwal. Sonal Ved is an author, journalist, and content director at India Food Network, Taste Made India. Food is her muse for writing. Two of her books, Tiffin and Whose Samosa Is It Anyway, have been credited by the New York Times. Besides, she's also food editor at Vogue India. She also contributes her pieces to food publications such as Food 52 and Thrillist. Please welcome Sonal Ved on stage. And she will be in conversation with Nandita Agarwal.
Hi Sonal, so before we go any further, let me ask you a question. So whose samosa is it anyways? You'll have to switch it on.
Hi everybody, thank you for being here. It's a great time to talk about food considering we've all eaten, so I'm hoping people won't be yawning or feeling hungry while we chat about all things food. Thank you. It means a lot that you took this afternoon out to hear me talk about my book. So Nandita, your first question is, whose samosa is it anyway? I mean, if I'm going to tell you that, then who's going to buy my book? Seriously, but that's always the last question people ask me, and then I have this mic drop moment where I say, you'll have to buy my book to find out. So actually, I'm going to still say that you have to buy my book to find out.
I know
You read the book. You read the book, a few of you all have. So yeah, whose samosa is it anyway is something that you will find if you read the book. Yeah, you can go to the next question. I'm going to dodge that one.
So in the same book, you've mentioned that your curiosity to understand Indian cuisines started when you were in school. It started in your school canteen, and you've also mentioned abbreviation, rotli, dal, bhat, and shak, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, what got you into food history and writing about food?
So I think if there are any Gujaratis in the house, they will know that RDBS is a very common acronym that we use to say rotli, dal, bhat, shak. It's just a cooler way of hiding what's in your tiffin. My curiosity about food and the diversity surely started in my school because, that's the first playground where you meet people from various different cultures. That was the space that made me very curious about how is it that my food is different. Our uniforms are same, our textbooks are same, our schedules are same. How is it that we're eating different things? So I was just curious, and then of course I asked them a lot of questions. I ate a lot of great food from other people's tiffins, which also is the name of my other book. So I think love for food, curiosity for food for me started pretty early on in school. I had a lot of Jain friends in my school, and that not just that food is different in different cultures, but also there were various degrees of vegetarianism is something that I observed at that age, because I'm a vegetarian, they're a vegetarian, but they're not eating certain ingredients and I am. So that sort of added a layer to vegetarianism, and that's how it all started.
Wow, it is quite interesting when you say it, degrees of vegetarianism.
We're a country like that, right? Thursdays and Fridays, Mondays and Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, depends. So I think egg vegetarians, non-egg vegetarians, people who eat egg in pasta and cakes, but those who don't eat. Otherwise, Jains who eat Parmesan cheese in pasta, but don't eat meat. Otherwise, it's all, we're a unique lot.
Makes sense. So in your book, Whose Samosa Is It Anyways, you take readers on a journey of taste through various timelines of Indian subcontinents. So what was your favorite period to research on and why?
I think more than my favorite period to research on, one of the most complicated chapters was when I was researching Southern Indian food history, because it is so nuanced. We know very little about it till today in to South India. Like even, for example, in Delhi or Ahmedabad, access to South Indian food is next to zero. It's very little. It's sweet sambar, It's just idli and it's dosa. In Bombay, we are fortunate to get little more access because it's closer to Karnataka. But I feel like that there was no understanding of South Indian food personally for me. So when I was researching on it, it was the most interesting part because I knew nothing about it. North India, you know, okay, the Mughals came, there was an influence in Delhi, the Afghans. You know a little bit because you've studied history, but even our history books in school don't talk about, they talk about the Cholas and the Pandyas and all of that, but you know, how did they influence us? What did they bring to India? That kind of deeper understanding came only when I was researching on the book. So for me, that was an interesting part to research. It was also the most complicated part to research, and I can say that 500 recipes down and one whole book down, I still cannot say kadamba perfectly. So it's just it's something that I'm still in the process of learning.
So now that you've mentioned the influence of Mughals and the Chola dynasty and everything, so tell me more about the role of migration when we talk about different food, different spices. Yeah.
I think if we go back to actually understanding what is Indian food, then I will say that we just ate like maybe barley, you know, because that's literally what the early Indians started eating. Everything else after that came via some or the other kind of migration. Like I've spoken about the Iranian pastoralist farmers who came from that region, migrated here with a certain variety of grain, and then they grew that here and that grew, and it just kept adding on, right? So every time we moved from the Indus Valley civilization to the next chapter of, you know, then the Vedas came. So every time we moved from one big era to another, different things kept getting added. So I won't be surprised, like what we're eating right now, like a lot of urban Indian homes already. You know, when you call your grocery guy now, you will say, you know, ek packet pasta bhej do, right? It's so easy for us. That was not something that our mothers did. So as time progresses, new and new things are getting added on. They are becoming a part of the culture. So I think that awareness of where we came from, where we are going, where we are at, as long as that's there, then I don't think Indian food will get diluted. But if you just adapt to it and consider that to be supreme because the West is kind of championing it, then I think that will become something where dilution of culture will happen.
Yes, so I mean, so in your book, Tiffin, you've written about 500 authentic recipes, as you mentioned, from your family's favorite and, I mean, to the forgotten treasures, as you mentioned. And you have showcased, I mean, different foods from Ladakh to Tamil Nadu and from Maharashtra to Arunachal Pradesh. I mean, it would definitely have been a very extensive process. So, I mean, what challenge did you face while compiling it? And I also remember the cute little pictures that you've added in the book throughout. I mean, it's quite
I think in any book, the biggest challenge is the publisher's deadline. That's the biggest challenge. Everything else can be handled, everything else can be managed. The publisher puts you on a deadline and then you only have that much time to bring the book together. I'm not somebody who pushes deadlines. So if I'm given a deadline, then I will find as much as content as I can within that time and get it out. So I think for me that I was given a little time to finish all my research, and to do all of that in a limited period of time was the biggest challenge. I also wanted to do as much as justice as I could to different parts of India where the food is still not recognized as much. Like, for example, northeastern food is still not spoken about as much. A lot of chefs who are contemporary Indian chefs who are running successful restaurants in the country were not able to give me information about it because they were humble enough to say that we don't know.
Yeah, that's quite interesting to know. So, I mean, can we still say that it is still not completely discovered?
For sure. For sure, I think the way the West is having a global, you know, awareness suddenly about Indian food, where the most successful restaurants in New York right now, according to Eater, according to James Beard, are Indian restaurants and Indian chefs. Just the way the West is opening up to the beauty of Indian cuisine, in the same way, I think within India also, chefs are opening up to regions that they were not looking at until now. For example, the Northeast. It's still a very small effort, but I see that there is at least interest in using ingredients from there. Like there's a very popular bakery in Bombay called Subco, and I saw that they were trying to use some Assamese seeds. Now they didn't have to, and it didn't feel like tokenism. It felt like they were genuinely interested in bringing that ingredient to the fore. So I think that effort is also good enough for me to at least know, oh, even this is a part of our kitchens in some other part of the country.
Yes, definitely. So, both of your books focuses on food and culture. So, I mean, what draws you to explore them in your writing?
I think that's just something that comes to us, to a journalist. It's very difficult to write about something with just like one perspective. The more you understand culture, the more you understand history, the more you understand different things that led to create where we are now, the more interesting your piece becomes. So I think that was just my journalistic instinct kicking in, where I wanted to explore food through not just food trends, through not just food listicles or restaurant openings or food reviews, because I was bored of doing that. I was just doing so much of that because I was working with some newspapers, and constantly there was a lot of need to do listicles and shorter stories and all of that. Where does one get the chance to write 50,000 words? And I think that my book, Whose Samosa Is It Anyway, gave me that opportunity to just go all out and just write. I do feel like I wish Whose Samosa Is It happened before Tiffin, because after I finished Tiffin, when I went back to research about Indian food, that's when I realized that there's so much that I could have still added on to Tiffin. So I'm hoping that I'll write a Tiffin sequel where I will put everything else that I learned in the second book.
So, I mean, we can wait for more 500 recipes, of course.
But that's what I'm saying, you know. That's what I felt when I did 500 recipes. I was like, how the hell am I going to come up or like find 500 recipes? And when the second book happened, I realized 500 is just a tip of the iceberg. This cuisine is so vast, like 500 recipes, more than 500 recipes you will find in one state. Forget the country. So I think we're just lucky to be in this culinary hotpot.
Definitely, but still 500 is a huge number. Anyways, I mean, I would like to know about your research journey for Whose Samosa Is It Anyways. I mean, when I go through your book, I see there, I mean, you have done a lot of referencing, you have mentioned a lot of people, I mean, in your book throughout. So, I mean, tell us more about your research journey when you started the book.
I think, like I said, I have a journalism background. It was the same process. It's just that I had to write more. The system was the same. You do your interviews, you do your research, you put together your first draft, you put together your second draft. It was the same process. I followed the same thing, and I broke down my whole book into various stages of Indian food history. And then I went about interviewing people who would know more. So I feel like I don't consider myself as a food historian, because to do that you need years of your self-research, submission of papers, perhaps a PhD. But I have just approached the subject through the view of a journalist. If you're a food journalist, what is it that you want to know from a book? If I pick up something on Indian food history, I try to put it out there via various interviews and via referencing a lot of content that I read from other people's books, like a Pushpesh Pant or a K.T. Achaya, to name just the two popular ones. But there were so many other people who've written about history, just Indian history, and then picking up things from them and then connecting them to various chapters. Like, for example, some of these authors don't even exist, like Aine Akbari, which was written during Akbar's time. It was a documentation of their time and their life and what they ate and the groceries they had, the money they spent on like their daily allowance. All that information and translations are available. You just have to go look through the archives, pick up those things, and then just put it up in a more summarized manner, the way somebody like you or a student or a chef will understand. My book is not for historians, because I believe that they know much more than what is there in the book.
Definitely. That gives a justice to the question. So, I mean, what are some of the most exciting food histories that you've researched while researching for your book? And, I mean, tell us more.
I think this is something that I was actually so amazed with, is Rabindranath Tagore and his connection with food. I believe this, that he was India's first food influencer. because he used to apparently he used to have this historian based in Bombay called Kurush Dalal. He once told me that he used to have these phases where he will just want to eat cauliflower every day. So then they will make everything with cauliflower. They will make a barfi with cauliflower. They will make dal with cauliflower, roti. They will make everything with cauliflower. So he was really like interested in food. He used to write, you know how, like for example, now a food influencer gets a campaign, say, hey, we want to sell Kellogg's. Can you write text? He wrote text for a Lipton ad, which got published in the newspaper. He was the face of a Bonvita ad that got published in a newspaper. So I think he was quite a food influencer. So that was very exciting for me to find that out, that somebody, such a profound political figure who's so interested in art, culture, was also as seeped in food.
That is very lovely to know. So as you've rightly mentioned that you've written for several impactful periodicals including Hindus, Indian Express and Vogue, and you're currently working with Harper's Bazaar. And I recently came across one of your article where you interviewed a sandwich because you were very fed up interviewing a chef. Quite interesting.
Because so basically there was a restaurant that was opening in Bombay, and they it's a deli which makes pizza, pasta, all of that. And I said, what am I supposed to, now what more am I supposed to ask them? Like, I don't want to know from the chef what was the influence behind your menu and all of that. I said, how about we just interview the sandwich? Like, if Chat GPT can do that and talk and have existential conversation, I said, so can a sandwich. So I sent the questions to them, to the restaurant. Things like, is butter your favorite? So I asked the sandwich, is butter your favorite brand of moisturizer? Or you know, you've been with fried chicken for a very long time. Why have you guys not committed to each other yet? Things like that. And they were really cool enough to give me like equally witty responses. So I think I just got lucky with that interview. It was just a different way of looking at food.
So, I mean, have you ever tried asking Chat GPT write more about Sonal Ved?
I'm more into Chat GPT than Chat GPT.
Savage. So, I mean, how does your approach to writing differs when you're writing for you're writing a book versus when you're writing a journalistic piece?
It's the same. You know, a lot of people feel like it's not, but the process is exactly the same. You have an editor who's screaming with a deadline. You have a publisher who's screaming even more with a deadline. You interview people, you put the text together, you write your first draft, you hate it, you delete it, you write your second draft, you send it to the editor sends you the edits back, you don't like the edits. It's the same process. It's just that book gives you the liberty to write more, and articles don't, because you have a word count, and that's the only difference. But I think it's just nice to have as much as journalistic integrity while writing anything, because then that means everything is factually double checked and triple checked and things like that.
You know what it reminds me of? I'm yet to complete 2 of my assignments that are due. So yeah, I mean, in your experience, what are some of the most common misconceptions people have about food history, and how do you try to address them through your writing?
I don't know what kind of misconceptions people have about history. One of the things that happened for me is I thought the process would be very linear. I thought it would be a very linear process where I'll start from Indus Valley, then I will go to the Vedas, and I will talk about something else, and I'll just keep on going in a linear format, but that never happened. Different information because parallel things were happening in the north side of the country, in the south side of the country, in the middle, in the west. You know, parallelly different histories were taking place, and to catch those things was something that was a challenging part, and I learned in that process that history cannot be linear.
That's a good thing to know, but I mean, there have been ingredients which we as Indian believe that they are our own. For say tomatoes, but tomatoes are not very Indian. So yeah. I mean, any thought on that?
But like that, nothing is truly like, you can't claim anything, right? For example, like I said in the beginning of the chat, like barley was something that we grew. It was indigenous. Mangoes were indigenous. There were certain that also came like years of human civilizations later. But man started eating from a very rudimentary stage. So like that, we can't claim anything. Everything came to us via influences that we kept picking up. And we're still in, food is an evolutionary process on its own. As we go ahead in human history, more and more is going to get added on to Indian cuisine. Like for example, right now, we're facing a moment where a lot of, contemporary chefs who are kind of creating a dialogue for Indian food are experimenting so much with Indian food. Perhaps 10 years down the line, this will become the narrative of Indian food. I don't know, right? So I think one needs to accept this, that there is no such a thing as authentic, non-authentic. Because when I wrote Tiffin, like I said, if I wrote this book after this, I would not claim this to be authentic, because who knows what is authentic and what's not. And I think that dialogue is also a very old dialogue now, to talk about what's authentic. We've moved past even that narrative. It's about what's making sense to us and what is it that we want to drive our cuisine towards. I think we're at that stage where we can take that call. Rather than getting influenced by what the West thinks the idea of Indian food should be. Oh, Indian food should be spicy, so okay, we are going to eat spicy food. I think we've moved past that place where we need the West to determine what our direction should be with our own culture and cuisine.
Definitely. So one more thing India is famous for is its sweet. I mean, it's quite unique than the Western desserts.
Yeah.
So what is your thought on that?
While I was researching, not every part of India has this whole big dessert culture. There are very few cuisines that have a very deep dessert culture, like Bengali sweets or Punjabi sweets. If you go to see, I didn't find that, like Northeast did not have such a big mithai culture as such. A lot of them consider fruit post meal to be a dessert. Even with Maharashtra, there is not such a deep plethora of mithais that's there. So we have our certain cuisines that are known for their mithais, but that's that.
Okay. So, I mean, when we
Even if you go to a mithai shop which doing Indian mithai, it's usually either Bengali or it's Punjabi. There's barely any other cuisine representation, at the most Gujarati, but I don't even know what I would put in that bucket of Gujarati sweets.
Yeah,
We're
that
very few.
was what I was coming to. So, I mean, there's this misconception that Gujarati food is sweet, and yeah, so I mean, what's your take on that?
I do feel like, I don't think that there is a misconception like that, but I also feel like people are moving past these stereotypes, because so much of work is being done. If the right kind of platforms are being followed, then we are moving past these typical narratives saying that, okay, all say South Indian food is seafood, or all Gujarati food is sweet, all Punjabi food is paneer and chicken. I think a lot of work is being done by, I said, contemporary Indian restaurants to change that narrative. The chefs leading those restaurants are trend makers. They are the ones who are creating thought processes. Food writers are trying to move us past it. So I think it's also about the audience to accept and read the right resources and know that this is the next chapter of Indian food. Let's please embrace it.
Yes.
And move past these stereotypes, because there's a lot more work to be done. We need to stop talking about things like authentic. We need to stop talking about these stereotypes and move past, okay, what is it that we want to exotify before the Western culture exotifies it.
So when we talk about Western culture, in your book you mentioned that paneer tikka or chicken tikka is not very Indian.
Yeah.
We got it from the British.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's your take on that?
So there are a lot of things like that. There is also jalebi, there's faluda, there's biryani, there's gulab jamun, there's samosa. A lot of these things we believe to be Indian came because of the influence that kept, like I said, there are these influence that came via different migrations or different invasions, and they introduced these things. The Khansamas cooked these things on the Indian land, and then slowly they moved on, but these dishes stayed back and became Indian.
Okay, so my next question would be, so Gujarat and South India, I mean the southern part of India. Sorry, it's mostly shares the coastal line. Still the eating habits is very different. I mean, the dishes that we eat are quite different, but yet there is a lot of similarity. So
Between what? Between Gujarat and South India?
yeah, I mean the food eating habits, like the rice. Rice is very important to them. So I mean, can you draw
Perhaps
a similarity?
perhaps it's what grows in that region. I have still not been able to identify why is it that Gujarat doesn't eat as much as fish as much as the south eats. I haven't been able to answer that. That's also something that's still a question for me. If the Mughals left such a big impact on us by changing our food habits, and the Portuguese gave us so much and changed the way we cook our curries and add tomatoes and onions and potatoes, why is it that the French who colonized Pondicherry did not leave anything? Like today there are 4 restaurants that have some token French food, but French didn't leave a big impact on Indian food. So those are just some things that are not yet out there, and I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. So, I mean, in the whole process of researching, being a food journalist, or, I mean, writing your books, so, I mean, what are the processes that you've learned, and, I mean, how have you learned about lesser known ingredients or vegetables, or, I mean, everything around food?
I think I've not learned about lesser known ingredients and all of that while writing my book. I learned more about it by following Thomas Zakaria on Instagram, because he's always talking about desi vegetables and this is some weird kind of tinda, and I don't know where he keeps finding all that stuff from. So that's the thing, right? We still don't know how to use it. There is a very beautiful organization called O Farms that's only working with greens from Maharashtrian forests and telling people how to cook them. But access to those things is still very expensive. Access to those things is still very rare. Unless it becomes mainstream and is available at a place where we buy our ingredients from, like a local shop, it's going to be a bit of a, gray area.
Okay. So, I mean, there are more than 500 varieties of rice available in the market right now. But when we go back to the, past, there were more than 1 lakh species of them. I mean, so because of our changing food habits, it has changed our the sustainability part and also the production part widely. So what's your take on that?
I think, as we are getting more and more globalized, there is this whole idea of everything becoming the same, right? Like today, if you go to Ladakh, not just with food, today if you travel to Ladakh or you go to Goa, that's the same kind of activities are being offered to people, like those motorbikes. And if you go to Goa or you go to Karnataka, the same kind of water sports are being offered, right? We are becoming a very homogenized society for some reason, and that's not, I think, very good for culture preservation. Which brings me to, tell me the question again.
The sustainability of...
So I think this homogenization of ingredients is something that a lot of people who are at the top are trying to fight back and bring back. For example, this year the government is talking about 2023 being the year of the millet, right? There is a reason why they are trying to push Indian millets on a global platform. I just heard the Prime Minister speak yesterday at the India Today conclave, and I cannot believe that 1 hour he got to talk about what is the moment that India is having right now. He chose to speak about millets. So clearly it's a big, important factor for the country to push. So I think there is effort being done. There is a cookbook that is being released on Indian millets. We are working towards bringing indigenous Indian crops or what is native to our land at the fore. A lot of chefs are using that in their food to make it accessible and for people to understand how to use them. Like for example, Chef Manu Chandra in Bangalore, he actually did a pop-up somewhere in Bombay where he cooked fried rice, but he used 3 kinds of Indian rice to make it, and it was delicious. It was just as normal fried rice. Like, why do we have to use Thai rice or some fancy Chinese rice when it works with indigenous Indian rice? So the thing is, chefs also have now moved on. Like Chef Manu says, I'm not going to millet-splain you. It's just there in your menu, and you just have to accept it as normal.
Yes. So I mean, I mean, what advice do you have for home cooks interested in exploring and incorporating regional Indian cuisines into their everyday cooking?
Just buy my book. 500 recipes, yeah. Just buy the book.
That's quite interesting. So, I mean, talking about, coming again to the sustainability part, because I'm a Gen Z, okay. So, I mean, it is very. I mean, I believe that my generation thinks that it is very important to be sustainable, yet not compromise on the choices that we make. So, do you have any thoughts on being sustainable? I mean, how can we have sustainable eating habits?
I think like don't eat. I prefer if people try to add variety to their meals. Like this Triple O farm that I spoke about did a little research where they gave, where they researched on the food plates of the Adivasis in Maharashtra, and they told these kids in school to draw 3 plates, and in the 3 plates draw what your grandfather ate, what your father ate, and what you ate, just ingredients. And what the child ate now was nothing like what the grandfather ate like one generation before. And then that in itself was an answer, right? We all want to eat capsicum, and we all want to eat broccoli, and we all want to eat zucchini. And that is really causing crops which are native to this land to get erased. So I think if that is something that we can be a little more mindful about, like for example, while making your salad, not putting iceberg lettuce and perhaps putting some local greens that you get, which are, in summer there are certain greens, and in winter you'll get different greens, and in monsoon you'll get different greens. If you just try to even do that much, I feel it's a little more sustainable than eating iceberg. Yeah. Or if you're eating an avocado, like you're a Gen Z, just eat the kurgi one. Why do you have to eat the Haas avocado?
Yeah, because the transportation also causes a lot of
carbon footprint.
Yeah. So, I mean, now that you've mentioned that avocados are brought here from California, and we can use it from the one made in
butterfruit from Coorg.
So, I mean, what in your opinion, I mean, how does geographical locations influence a cuisine or a dish or our eating habits?
Availability of resources, right? You're going to cook from what is available to you in your region. In fact, once I was writing a piece for Vogue, which was about this whole farm to table movement, and how what is available is getting transferred onto the plate. And this biologist based in Goa, she told me that according to her research, she's always found out that nature grows in that region what the body of the person living in that region needs. So if they need more ingredients that will cool them off, then the ingredients around that region will be more hydrating. If they need something that will give them warmth, then the ingredient in cuisine will reflect that, right? Because man is very smart. He will cook what is going to be of benefit to his body.
Okay, so we'll have a quick rapid fire round, and then we'll open the floor for the, So what's the funniest cooking disaster you have ever experienced?
The funniest cooking disaster was when I was in school and we were trying to make the Mari biscuit cake. We tried to make a Mari biscuit pudding, and in that pudding, in the custard, I forgot to add sugar. And I was so excited to make it because I was literally a child, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I have this habit, every time I used to mess up a dish, I would just give it to my sister and say, you fix it, because she's a very natural cook. And what she did is the custard was made, the pudding was ready, and we didn't know what to do. She fixed it by making some insertions in the pudding and then passing like sugar syrup through it, which then got soaked in the pudding, and the pudding was perfect. So that was a smart one.
So if you had to eat one dish for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
It would definitely be the Gujarati taco that every Maharaj in South Bombay makes.
Wow. So what is your favorite spice to cook with?
More than spices, I prefer to cook with herbs. So I really like to put mint and kasuri methi in everything. Mint is my biggest flex.
So which Indian food do you think is the most iconic?
whatever Chef Manish Malhotra makes that Indian accent.
Wow. So, what's your favorite comfort food?
That Gujarati taco that I told you. That's the first thing I want to eat. Or actually, Raj Kachori.
Wow.
I think Raj Kachori is the best representation of Indian food for me, not because it's North Indian and I'm not trying to stereotype Indian food. I just feel the way it is so textured, the way it has so many temperatures, it has the warm ragda inside, it has cold yogurt, it has so much of, it's crispy, soggy, etc., etc. I feel like it's a good representation of how wholesome our cuisine is.
So, what's the weirdest food combination you've ever tried?
This TikTok trend where they put coffee in an espresso, no, they put orange juice in an espresso. I made people try it and they still haven't forgiven me.
Okay, one kitchen tool you can never cook without.
Chopping board.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah, it's a flex. You have to have a great chopping board.
Well, yeah, that's the end of the round.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think we can open the floor for the questions. Can we pass the mic?
Sorry? Please do, please do. I've tried so much, so hard to do it. Okay, I need some private lessons with you. Yeah, thank you. I'll try to make it quick.
Yeah, my question is with regard to food, which has become a kind of political issue in the country in the past few years. We are aware about how the non-vegetarians are being discriminated. You have Domino's turning veg from, since 2008 in Gujarat. Then we have IIT students protesting against sharing a table with non-vegetarians. So, as someone who has thought about food and researched on food and written on food, what would you have to say about these kinds of developments around food?
I think food has always been political since the time, I mean, if we feel like the Mughals just came here in a bus, gave us biryani and went away, then that's not how it happened, right? It was bloody then, it's bloody now. It's always been that way. I think it's about how we as change makers, we as people who are at the forefront of setting mindsets, try to do as much as we can with our work. I think if we're able to do just that, then that's going to be enough to create some movement. And I think that would be my answer to your question. Because food and politics is something that has never been too far from each other, even since, it's not like now it's like that, it's always been that way.
Hello, ma'am. I just wanted to ask, I wanted to know your opinion on what is the influence of vegan food on the Indian households and the Indian kitchen.
There was a very interesting research written in Tony Joseph's book, Early Indians, where he wrote about how, I'm going to try to simplify it, he's written in a very beautiful manner about how there is a certain kind of gene pool that never reached the southern belt of India. It only reached the ability of man to be able to digest milk and lactose came only towards the north of India and never reached the south, which is why you will see a lot more dairy being eaten, consumed, a part of their cuisine in the northern side of India and not in south. So I think those kind of things are what tell me about why certain regions of India are not vegan because it's fashionable to be vegan, but they are vegan, they are intrinsically vegan. They do, I know, but the consumption of paneer, milk, dairy, perhaps according to that research that they have done on early Indians and the Indian digestion patterns now says that the North Indians are able to assimilate lactose far better than the South Indians, and of course through history, because it's been so many years of man being civilized, perhaps the gene pool is more cross-pollinated and now we're able to adapt to it better.
Hello. भारतीय धार्मिक साहित्य है, उसमें कौन सी सब्जी है और कौन सी मिठाई है?
सर आप अगर मुझे ये इतना हिंदी नहीं समझ में आएगा, अगर आप थोड़ा उसको बेटर
In our religious traditional book, there is mention some vegetables and mithai sweets.
It depends on which.
Mahabharata and Ramayana and Jain also.
So if you see this book, Whose Samosa Is It Anyway? If you see the book, Whose Samosa Is It Anyway? वो बुक में मैंने कई सारी ऐसी मिठाइयों के बारे में बात की है जिसके नाम अभी वो नाम नहीं रहे हैं. मैं आपको एक एग्जांपल देती हूँ. जैसे एक डिश है पूरिका, जो एक इंडियन स्क्रिप्चर में उसके बारे में लिखा गया है, पर अब वो पूरिका नहीं रही, वो कुछ और बन गई है. एक जो बालूशाही का अभी वर्जन है, वो जो बालूशाही अभी वो तभी वैसे नहीं थी, वो कुछ और तरीके से बन रही थी. उसका बहुत ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड संस्कृत नाम है जिसके बारे में मैंने रिसर्च किया है और वही किताबों के ट्रांसलेशंस में से पिकअप करके ये बुक में मैंने मेंशन किया है.
I think Ramayana mentioned more about sattvic food, where when Sita was abducted, she offered sattvic food to the Ravan's family. So, I mean, that's the only mention of food and cuisines and dietary preferences, I guess. We can move to another question.
Okay, hi.
एक महाभारत में पम्पकिन मतलब कि कोड़ू का उल्लेख है, बेस्ट सब्जी बोला गया है. और दूसरा खीर पाक मतलब खीर बोलते हैं अपने, तो वो सब में है, महाभारत में है, रामायण में है और जैन रिलीजियस ट्रेडिशनल में भी है.
ठीक है.
और तुर्की में भी वही सेम है. तुर्की में
तो
भी
उस तरीके से जो अब जैन लोग जो नहीं खाते हैं प्याज और आलू, जब जैन के स्क्रिप्चर्स लिखे गए थे उसमें तो वो सब चीज़ों का मेंशन ही नहीं है, क्योंकि तब तो इंडिया में आलू और प्याज था ही नहीं. तो उनकी बुक्स में ऐसी चीज़ें लिखी गई हैं जो अभी एग्जिस्ट नहीं करती है, जैसे हीरीला, शिरीला, ये सब जो इंग्रेडिएंट्स हैं वो अब अवेलेबल नहीं है, या तो उनके नाम इतने सेंचुरीज के बाद बदल गए जो हमें भी नहीं पता है कि वो इंग्रेडिएंट्स क्या है. तो उसके लिए बहुत हाइपर रिसर्च करना पड़ेगा. शायद हिस्टोरियंस के पास इसका जवाब होगा, पर डेफिनेटली मिठाइयों के नाम हैं कि ये खाया करते थे, ये इस तरीके से बनाया करते थे, नाम तो बिल्कुल है. मोर देन रामायण देयर आर अदर स्क्रिप्चर्स आल्सो जिसमें these names are mentioned, including the Vedas, which are the first scriptures.
I think we'll take a couple of more questions.
Hi, I want to ask one question. As you said that the development of any dish is a very evolutionary process. So where do we draw the line and define a dish's national identity, or let's say regional identity, that this dish is indigenous or was developed by the native of a particular land?
I think this is a very tricky subject, and I've had this discussion with a lot of my chef friends too, and food journalists, to say, how is it that an Indian accent making blue cheese naan okay for the next chapter, as the next chapter of Indian food, but this guy who's making dosa ice cream on the street not okay, because at the end of the day both is doing some kind of fusion to Indian food. The conclusion that I'm at right now, and I'm very certain that this is going to change in a few months like everything else changes, is that there is place for both kind of things. There is place to preserve authentic Indian cuisine that your mother makes, or my mother makes, or my grandmother makes. There's space for that, and there's space to archive that, but we cannot stop others from doing what they think is the evolution of food. I think there are both kinds of people, and there's an audience to eat, try, preserve, and relish both these sides.
Yes, we can move to another question there.
Hello. Yeah, I had a question that bread as an ingredient in Middle East, Europe, and in the ancient civilization, it has been the refuge of many people. So now the new culture of, not including bread or wheat in their diets or becoming gluten-free. I just wanted to know your opinion on being gluten-free.
I think this is more to do with people's dietary preferences. I think every single person in the room, if I tell them vegetarians go on this side and people who don't eat people who eat meat go on another side, we're all going to not know where to go, because all of us have such peculiar food preferences, which could be based on religious identity, religious choices, which could be based on health preferences. So it's very, I can't say that, okay, abhi ye to sab naya hai, pehle to sab kha lete the, ab kya badi baat. It's not like that. There are certain, changes that have happened in human body which have made them intolerant towards a certain kind of grain, because perhaps the Indian grain that your grandfather grew up eating is not not that wheat anymore, and it's causing certain allergies in a certain people. So I think we should just leave them to their own dietary preferences.
My question is with regard to the cultural preservation through food. So what are your opinion or your comments about chicken tikka masala being the national food of UK?
Okay. I mean, this is something that they experimented with, called it their own. It belongs to their cuisine now. It has no association with Indian food. The usage of spices, tomato, the way the chicken is treated has Indian influences, but that's that.
I think
it's a British dish.
Yes, it was definitely a treat. The interview was definitely a treat.
Thank you. In fact, I just want to go back to the question that you asked me about the political identity in food. Just right now when I was talking about putting two people in one spot, saying the vegetarians here and the meat eaters on the other side, in this whole woke generation, it's apparently not even politically correct to use the word non-vegetarian anymore. So when we say something is vegetarian, by saying non-vegetarian, you're putting everything else as veg is the only food group, and everything that's not vegetarian is not counted, right? So there is also a big debate on whether it is politically correct to use that word or not. I think this is going to just be something that's going to keep going on, and it's all about how we're sensitive towards other people's food choices, non-judgmental towards it. That's good enough.
Thank you, Sonal, for sharing your insights.
Thanks a lot, Sonal. On the point of vegetarian and non-vegetarian, it reminds me of this Kannada saying. In Kannada, you say "Naan a vegetarian," which we don't know whether you're vegetarian or not. Naan means I am vegetarian. We'd like to present you with a memento.